I understand why you stopped me, but you have the wrong person. I live right over there and I was just walking through the park.
All right, calm down, sir. We just need to verify your information.
Miller Park's high-resolution security cameras captured everything with cold, uncompromising clarity. Like an unbiased witness, they captured the rustling of dry leaves underfoot, the small ripples on the lake's surface as ducks glided across, and the moment a single wrong decision triggered a chain of irreversible consequences. On a wooden bench by the water's edge, an elderly black man sat upright, slowly scattering handfuls of seeds onto the lake's surface. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't looking around. And he didn't seem afraid of being caught. It was simply a peaceful morning. The kind of peace one only truly appreciates after decades of living under pressure. That man was Marcus Thorne, 64 years old. He had worn his badge for 35 years, commanded the city's biggest raids, faced internal corruption scandals without batting an eye, and rewrote policies on using force to curb the impulsive mistakes of young officers. But today, Marcus carried no power, no motorcad, no insignia on his chest. No one called him chief. He was just an old man in a thick wool coat, a beanie pulled low, sitting alone in the park during rush hour. And that very appearance, in the eyes of someone seeking a target, became the perfect excuse. On the edge of the park, a patrol car rolled slowly. The tires crunched softly on the gravel, a familiar sound like a cut in the silence. The driver was Officer Kyle Braden, 28 years old, 4 years in the force, confident enough to think he was always right, but not yet mature enough to understand that power, in a moment of uncontrolled rage, could turn into crime. Braden looked at Marcus, and in his mind, the story was already written: a vagrant, a suspect, an easy target. Marcus heard footsteps approaching behind him, calmly scattering seeds into the water, as if he were waiting to see how this time the system he once served would treat an ordinary black man. That morning was cool but pleasant, the kind of weather that makes you want to put on an extra layer and slow your pace. Marcus Thorne savored it. After more than 3 decades of living to the constant buzzing of walkie-talkies, he was learning to accept the luxury of not having to go anywhere. No meetings, no political pressure, no midnight crime calls. Just time, something he had always lacked. Miller Park was sparsely populated at this hour, quiet enough to hear the gentle flapping of ducks' wings on the water and the rustling of the wind through the bare trees. Marcus sat very straight, a habit of someone who had stood for hours in front of police formations. His thick woolen coat was worn at the cuffs. His baggy trousers were old and worn, and his shoes were no longer shiny. That was his choice for comfort. But to a discerning eye, they took on a different meaning. To someone who didn't know him, Marcus looked like someone with nowhere to go, someone waiting for him. A person can be overlooked, or worse, suspected, simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He opened the small paper bag beside him, took out another handful of grains, and tossed them further out to where several large ducks were waiting. They swam towards him without fear. Marcus smiled faintly. He always believed that creatures sensed tranquility. Humans, however, didn't always. He knew that better than anyone. Throughout his career, he had witnessed the smallest situations escalate into disasters simply because an officer didn't know when to stop. The sound of a car engine grew closer. Marcus heard it, but didn't turn. He didn't need to look to know it was a police car. The revving of the engine, the sound of tires hitting gravel, it was all so familiar, it was ingrained in his subconscious. He slowly brushed his hands, letting them rest on his knees. A relaxed yet deliberate posture. Marcus wanted to observe. Marcus wanted to know what kind of police officer was approaching him, someone on duty, or someone seeking a sense of control. And in that moment, as the car came to a complete stop behind him, Marcus understood that his quiet morning was over, and another test for the system he once led was beginning. Behind the wheel of patrol car 4 Alpha 2 was Kyle Braden, Arshabah, a county officer with less than 4 years of service. For him, those 4 years were enough to feel like a seasoned officer, enough to believe his instincts were sharper than the law books, but not enough to understand that this early confidence was often the seed of major mistakes. At the station, Braden was known as a hot-headed man. He didn't like waiting for calls from the switchboard. He preferred to wander around, observing, looking for something to intervene in. For Braden, a quiet shift was a failed shift. Through the windshield, he saw Marcus Thorne on the bench, an older, black man, sitting alone, a thick coat in the not-too-cold morning. Those details, in Braden's mind, quickly pieced together into a familiar story. He might be hiding something in his coat. He might be waiting for a deal, sitting in the park during working hours, with no clear purpose. Braden didn't need proof. He needed a reason, and that reason could be created later. The car slowed down. Braden switched on his turn signal, swerving close to the curb, the tires grinding against the thin layer of gravel along the roadside. The dash cam started recording, the body cam on his chest poised for activation. Braden adjusted his work belt, straightened his shirt. A familiar gesture before any approach he believed to be risky. His right hand unconsciously moved near the gun stock, not because of a real threat, but because of a habit nurtured by constant suspicion. In Braden's mind, this was a simple situation. A quick check, a few questions, perhaps a request for identification. If the other man reacted wrongly, everything would escalate according to the script Braden had rehearsed hundreds of times in his head. He didn't see a retired man, not 35 years of service to the profession. He saw only an image that fit his preconceived notions. As Braden opened the car door and stepped out, a soft metallic clang echoed in the park's stillness, signaling the moment power officially entered the private space of a man merely feeding birds. Braden slammed the car door shut behind him, the dry sound echoing clearly in the quiet park. He strode toward the bench with firm steps, his posture upright, his shoulders slightly tense, as if entering a dangerous situation rather than approaching an elderly man feeding ducks. When he was a few meters away, Braden spoke, his voice loud and decisive, loud enough for those further away to hear. "Hey, you there. Get up and move away from the bench." Marcus Thorne stopped midair. Grains slipped from between his fingers into the water, creating small ripples. He didn't turn immediately, not out of defiance, but because he was accustomed to controlling his reflexes. He lightly brushed his hands, placed them on his knees, and then slowly turned around. When their eyes met, Marcus saw everything in a flash: the shoes, barely worn by years, the gaze more tense than necessary, the hand hovering near the weapon, and the gleaming metal nameplate that read Braden. "Good morning, officer," Marcus said, his voice low, even, and clear. "What is it?" It was a polite question, but it carried no hint of fear or submission. That was precisely what irritated Braden. He took another step, unnecessarily closing the distance, his body leaning forward as if to overpower. "I told you to stay away from the chair. I need to see your hands." Marcus didn't react sharply. He maintained his posture, his hands clearly placed on his knees, palms open. "My hands are here," he replied. "I was just feeding the birds." I ask again, "What did I do wrong?" Braden narrowed his eyes. That question wasn't part of the script he'd prepared. An approach like this, in his experience, usually ended in awkwardness, apologies, or at least silence. Instead, Marcus maintained a calm, unwavering gaze. Braden cleared his throat, searching for a sufficiently official excuse to continue. "We received reports of suspicious activity in this area," he said, his voice stiffening. "I need to investigate." It was a familiar, easy-to-use phrase, difficult to verify on the spot. Marcus listened, nodding slightly, not in agreement, but because he recognized the first sign of an approach based on assumption rather than fact. And he knew, from this moment on, every word and action of Braden would be weighed against the law. Marcus Thorne didn't rise. He remained seated on the bench, back straight, feet firmly planted on the ground, his gaze calmly fixed on Braden. That silence, instead of calming the situation, only irritated the young officer. Braden was accustomed to his orders being obeyed immediately. When that didn't happen, he felt his authority challenged. "You fit the description of a suspicious person," Braden said, his voice low and menacing. "I order you to stand and show me your identification." Marcus took a slow breath. He'd been through hundreds of similar conversations. Only before he was on the other side. "Fit what?" "Officer," he asked, his voice still even. "Can you specify what crime I'm suspected of?" Braden paused for a moment, then replied quickly, as if prepared. "Loitering. Loitering in a public area without a clear purpose." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Lying around, under the laws of this state, requires intent to commit a crime or obstruct another person. I was sitting on a park bench, feeding the birds. That's not a crime." That answer made Braden's face flush. He took another half step, his voice raised. "You're not in a position to argue the law with me." Marcus didn't budge. "I'm just reiterating my rights. If you have no reasonable doubt, this is a voluntary contact. In that case, I'm not obligated to provide documents or answer questions." He paused for a moment, then continued, slowly and clearly, "I do not consent to being searched or detained." To Braden, those words were like a slap in the face. He didn't hear a citizen exercising a constitutional right. He only heard defiance. "I didn't ask your opinion." Braden snapped, "I ordered it." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. His gaze was neither challenging nor conciliatory. "Orders don't replace legal grounds," he said. "You're turning a normal situation into a civil rights violation. I advise you to reconsider." In that brief moment, Braden faced a simple choice: back down and end the confrontation, or take a step forward and let his ego guide him. And he chose wrong. Braden felt the gazes of those around him. In the distance, a jogger slowed down. Near the walkway, a woman walking her dog stopped, her eyes a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Their presence made Braden feel judged, and it only fueled his ego. If he retreated now, he would appear weak. To Braden, that was unacceptable. He took a deep breath, clenched his jaw, and made his decision. "You want to be a lawyer here," Braden said sarcastically. "Fine. Then we'll do it the hard way." He raised his hand to the intercom, his voice becoming firmer. "I'm holding you in custody for questioning regarding drug activity and obstruction of justice. Now, stand up." Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. as if to suppress his frustration. "Officer," he said, opening his eyes and looking directly at Braden. "You're making a mistake that will haunt you for the rest of your life. I'm giving you one last chance to get back in your car and leave." That warning didn't deter Braden. On the contrary, it enraged him. "Get up," Braden yelled, his hand moving from the radio to the taser. The peaceful atmosphere of the park vanished completely. The ducks swam away hastily, the water rippling with chaotic waves. The woman with the dog from earlier quickly pulled out her phone, pointing the lens at the two men. "I'm filming," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "He did nothing wrong." Braden glanced at her, his eyes cold. "Ma'am, step back. This is a police investigation. I'm in a public place," she replied. "And I'm filming for safety." Marcus nodded slightly at her, a gesture so subtle it was almost imperceptible. Then he turned back to face Braden. He understood perfectly well that an officer's most dangerous state was when adrenaline and pride mingled. He didn't want this situation to end with a gunshot. "I will stand," Marcus said clearly, each word spoken slowly. He braced himself against the chair and rose, his tall frame forcing Braden to look up slightly. "I am obeying your orders under legal objection. This is unlawful detention." Braden didn't respond. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt, the metal clanging together with a dry, sharp sound. In that moment, everyone around understood that the situation had crossed a line it should never have crossed. Braden took a decisive step forward and gestured for Marcus to turn around. "Hands behind your back," he said quickly, giving Marcus no chance to react. Marcus complied, each movement slow and deliberate, as if he were instructing a class rather than being arrested. "I'm not resisting," he said loudly enough for the dashcam and the nearby woman's phone to capture. "I'm cooperating while protesting the legality of this detention." Braden didn't care. He grabbed Marcus's wrist and yanked it sharply upwards. Not with the standard technique Marcus had taught at the academy. It was a painful motion, intended to subdue and humiliate rather than secure control. Marcus winced slightly, pain shooting up his shoulder and wrist. But he didn't utter a sound. The metal handcuffs tightened with short, sharp clicks. Too tight. Deliberate. "You're hurting him," the woman said from behind, her voice strained. "He's not resisting." Braden ignored him, his other hand pulling the radio up to his shoulder. "Dispatch. This is 4 Alpha 2, he said. "An uncooperative suspect is being held at Miller Park, requesting a prisoner transport." Marcus shook his head slightly. "Son," he said softly, just loud enough for Braden to hear, "you're making up a story to cover up an illegal stop. Every second counts." Braden spun around, his eyes blazing with anger. "Shut up," he growled. "I'm conducting a search as part of the arrest procedure." He began the search, his rough touches unnecessary. Braden's hand plunged into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small paper bag. Grains spilled onto the grass, scattered like a silly trace of the whole affair. No drugs, no weapons, nothing but duck seeds. Braden continued, fumbling at his belt, his pockets, then pulled out a worn black leather wallet. It was the crucial moment. If he opened it, if he looked at the carefully tucked-in retirement ID and badge, it would all be over right there. But Braden didn't open it. He tucked the wallet into his cargo pants pocket. "We'll verify your identity at the station," he said, his voice smug. "If you're hiding your name, you're definitely hiding something else." Braden grabbed Marcus's bicep and pushed him toward the patrol car. Their steps weren't quick, but forceful. Marcus kept his balance, head held high, taking in every detail, the handcuffs not double-locked, personal belongings left on the grass, the excessive push for an older man. As they passed the woman filming, she spoke again. "I have it all on video. I'll send it to the press." Braden turned around and shouted, "Go ahead. Let everyone see what happens when you don't listen to the police." Marcus almost laughed. He didn't know that those very images would determine his fate. As they reached the patrol car, Braden opened the rear door and gestured for Marcus to duck. The rear compartment of the Interceptor was cramped, made of hard plastic and metal, smelling of cleaning products mixed with old sweat. Braden didn't reprimand him. He placed his hand on the back of Marcus's neck and pressed down firmly. Marcus skillfully turned to avoid impact, then sat down in the seat. "Seatbelt," he said emphatically. Braden froze. "What prisoner transport regulations?" "Section 402. Marcus replied evenly. "You must fasten it. If an accident occurs, you are personally responsible." Braden stared through the bars, his eyes a mixture of contempt and annoyance. "You know a lot of regulations," he said, then yanked the seatbelt and fastened it. A more forceful motion than necessary. The door slammed shut, the metallic clang echoing in the enclosed space. The car started moving. Through the frosted glass, Marcus saw the park receding behind him, the empty bench, seeds scattered on the grass. The woman still on the phone, presumably with someone who understood the value of the images he had just captured. Braden didn't look back. He sped up faster than necessary, using his horn and flash to force other cars out of the way, even though there was no emergency. Marcus noted, another violation, another entry on the growing list. All the way. Braden spoke incessantly, as if needing to fill the silence with justifications. "The problem with a man like you," he said, glancing in the rearview mirror, "is that he thinks he doesn't have to obey the law. Respect the badge, and you'll be respected." Marcus looked directly into that reflection. "Respect is two-way," he replied. "Power isn't a privilege. It's a mandate." Braden scoffed. "You fit the bill. Crime area. Suspicious attire. If you have nothing to hide, why not show your papers? The Fourth Amendment exists to protect the innocent." Marcus said calmly, "Not to make things convenient for the police." They turned the ramp down to the garage of Station 12. Marcus recognized every brick wall, every corner. He had campaigned for funding to renovate this place. The steel gate slammed shut behind the car with a heavy clank. A finale. All-out stop. Braden switched off the engine, his voice confident. "We're here. John Doe. Now we'll know who you are." Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. Not out of fear, but because he knew when that door opened, the truth would come in with them, and it wouldn't be Braden's side. Braden opened the back door of the car and grabbed Marcus by the collar of his jacket, pulling him out of the cramped passenger compartment. Marcus's legs were stiff from the long ride in handcuffs, but he still stood firm. The handcuffs tightened, making his fingers numb, each pulse clearly audible beneath the cold metal. Braden gripped his biceps, urging him on faster than necessary, as if to assert his control right there on the police station steps. They passed the temporary detention area, a few men in the cells looking up, their eyes weary and more familiar with this scene than anyone else. The booking area door opened. The space was thick with the smell of stale coffee, floor cleaner, and the clicking of keyboards. Phones rang. Radios crackled. Behind the tall reception counter stood Sergeant Thomas Miller. "Wusherba," graying hair. His mustache perfectly groomed years ago. He was reading files. His glasses perched low on his nose. "There's a non-cooperation case." "Sir," Braden said loudly, pushing Marcus against the counter. "No identification. Resistance. Loitering. Thinks he's a lawyer." Miller didn't look up immediately. He signed the last line. Then sighed. "All right. Bring him here." Miller said, "Go through the usual procedures." Braden pulled his wallet from his pocket and slammed it down on the counter. "Here's his wallet." "He won't open it for me." Miller frowned, reaching for the wallet. Just then, he looked up. Miller froze. He blinked. Then he took off his glasses and looked more closely. Time seemed to slow down just for him. That face, the silver beard. The calm eyes was the face that had once stood before this entire group, given orders, and protected them when politicians wanted to sacrifice police officers to appease public opinion. "Chief," Miller whispered. The word slipped from his lips so softly it was almost inaudible. Braden chuckled briefly. "Chief? What kind of chief?" "Sarge. Just an old man in the park." Miller slammed his hand down on the counter. The jarring sound silenced the room. "Unclip him." Now, immediately, Miller sprang to his feet, the chair behind him tipping over. "Do you know who you've just brought in here?" Braden froze, his smile turning to one side. Miller pointed to the wall behind the counter. There hung a framed portrait in dark wood, Marcus Thorne, in his police uniform, stars gleaming on his lapel. His familiar stern gaze. Braden's blood drained from his veins. He slowly turned, looking at Marcus, then at the picture, then back at Marcus. I don't know." Braden stammered. Marcus looked up, his voice low and quiet, but heavy as a hammer blow. "Unclip him." Braden bent down, his hand trembling so much he dropped the key. The metal rolled across the linoleum floor. He picked it up, fumbling to insert it into the lock. A click, then a second. The handcuffs came off. Marcus gently rubbed his wrist, the reddish-purple marks clearly visible. The booking room was eerily silent, and in that silence, Kyle Braden's career had officially come to an end. Sergeant Miller strode quickly around the counter, his voice low but still trembling with anger. "Chief, I'm truly sorry. I didn't know this." Marcus raised his hand to stop him. "Thomas, it's not your fault," he said, his voice calm to the point of being cold. Then he turned to Braden. "Put your weapon and insignia on the counter." Now, Braden instinctively recoiled half a step, his hands raised as if he'd just realized he was on the other side of the power grid. "Wait, I followed procedure. You refused to show your papers. You've had my papers in your pocket for 20 minutes. Marcus interrupted, his gaze not raised but enough to make the room hold its breath. Just then, the doors to the administrative office burst open. Captain Reynolds and the current sheriff, David Alvarez, hurried down the stairs. Alvarez stopped short when he saw Marcus standing in the middle of the booking room, the handcuff marks still visible on his wrists. "Marcus, my God," he said, striding quickly toward him. "What happened?" Marcus turned to his former pupil, his voice calm but steely. "One of your officers just decided that the Fourth Amendment is optional." Alvarez turned to Braden. His gaze was enough to silence any defense. "Report," Alvarez said curtly. Braden swallowed hard. "Chief, I made a stop on suspicion. The subject refused to cooperate. Do you have reasonable suspicions?" Alvarez asked. "A specific charge," Braden stammered. "He was wearing a coat. Sitting in the park, feeding ducks. Marcus added. Without looking at Braden, Alvarez closed his eyes for a moment. Then he reached for the wallet on the counter and opened it. Retirement cards and badges gleamed in the fluorescent light. Alvarez looked at Braden. You arrested someone for not showing identification, while you had theirs. This is disenfranchisement under the cloak of power. Federal. Alvarez turned to Miller. Take Braden to interview room number 1. Confiscate the weapon. The badge. Call the Department of Internal Affairs. Call the union representative. Now. Miller didn't hesitate. He placed his hand on Braden's arm. This time with the right technique. The right distance. Braden walked like a sleepwalker. His face pale. His eyes vacant. When the interview room door closed, Alvarez turned to Marcus. We'll handle this. Marcus. Transparent. Completely. Marcus nodded. I know you'll do it right, he said softly. But today, I don't want favoritism. I want the records. I want the body cam. The dash cam. The radio logs right now. Because today, I'm not the sheriff. I'm just a citizen. The investigation began that very day and unfolded faster than any internal incident Marcus had ever witnessed in his career. Not because of his identity, but because the evidence was overwhelming. The video recorded by the woman in the park went viral within hours. Even before the department's communications office could draft a press release. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of comments. It showed a young officer, his voice harsh, his posture aggressive, confronting a completely calm older man. No weapons. No illegal activity. Only power used to coerce. When Braden's body cam footage was released, the situation worsened. The images showed the entire escalation provocative words. Baseless accusations. The rough handcuffing. And the deliberate disregard for the wallet after taking it. There was no room for interpretation. No more momentary misjudgment. It was simply a series of bad decisions. 3 weeks later, Kyle Braden was fired. The disciplinary board concluded he had violated 14 internal regulations and 3 fundamental constitutional rights. His license was permanently revoked, meaning Braden's police career was over. Not just in this city, but statewide. But Marcus Thorne didn't stop there. He filed a federal lawsuit for civil rights violations, targeting the system that allowed an officer like Braden to act without oversight. The city quickly opted for a settlement. The final amount was $450,000. Before the press cameras, Marcus made it clear that this wasn't about money. If they can do this to me, he said, standing on the courthouse steps. Imagine what they've been doing to people who don't know the law, who have no status, who have no one to listen to them. He channeled all of the settlement money into establishing the Thorne Legal Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal support to victims of illegal stop-and-go checks and arrests. For Marcus, this wasn't revenge. It was a responsibility. Months later, Marcus Thorne returned to Miller Park one winter morning. The lake was partially frozen, the thin ice reflecting the pale gray sky. He sat in the same old bench, his thick wool coat still on, his hat pulled low to shield him from the cold wind. In his hand was a small bag of seeds. Marcus scattered handfuls of seeds onto the ice, where the ducks gathered, awkwardly waddling and scrambling for food. The scene was quiet, almost devoid of any trace of the events that had shaken the city. Marcus took a deep breath. He understood better than anyone that the system wasn't an invisible monster. It was made up of laws and people. Laws, for the most part, were for protection. But people carried prejudices. egos, and moments of weakness. The badge on his chest could be a shield for the weak, or a weapon in the hands of a bully. The difference lay in the heart and control of the wearer. He thought about Kyle Braden, about a career that ended too soon, not with joy, but with sadness mixed with disappointment. That was the price of not knowing when to stop, not knowing how to listen, and treating power as a personal privilege. Marcus also thought about those who lacked legal knowledge, who had no cameras, who had no one to protect them, those who didn't have the opportunity to stand up like he did that day. Marcus stood up, brushed his hands lightly, and watched the ducks disperse on the ice. He had retired. That was true. But some shifts don't end with returning the badge. As long as stories like this continue, as long as power is used to intimidate instead of protect, the responsibility of those who understand the law and love justice is not truly over. What do you think? Was Kyle Braden's punishment sufficient? Or should he face criminal prosecution for unlawful arrest? And have you ever been in a situation where power was used to bully instead of protect? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please share it. The truth only has power when it is seen. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories exposing the truth behind headlines. We'll meet again.